So now it's time that we start to do something really cool, and that is inside of our terminal being able to write Python commands in there. So if I just typed out Python something, it would run something else for us. We'll see what that means here shortly, but basically I want to turn an entire folder into a module. So let's go ahead and open up our Finder window, and all of this code in here I'm going to actually put into a new folder called old_source. And just copy and paste all of that stuff in there. I'm doing this because we're going to be working with that code still in the future, but I just don't need it in there right now. In fact, I'm going to be using HungryPy to do some new stuff where on our desktop, we're going to do Python HungryPy, and that's it. In fact, I'm even going to change this to just hungry and get rid of py in general so there's no confusions whatsoever as to what we're going to be doing about here. Okay, cool. So I'm going to actually close out all these open files and say don't save. I'm going to open up a new window here. And we want to use this window because we're going to be creating a couple files and turning this hungry directory or folder into an actual Python file. So now I'm going to go ahead and make sure I can see the sidebar here. So view sidebar. And I'm going to save this file with Command S or Control S, depending on what computer you're on. Going into the desktop, going into Hungry, and going to do __init__.py. That is 2 underscores in there, right? So 1, 2. Init is a initializing file. So if I go ahead and hit save, something's going to happen here. Now, before I actually do that, I'm going to change it just to something different for the moment. So I'm just going to call it init. And I'm going to go ahead and navigate into the desktop. So cd desktop. Cd desktop. Let's try that again. Okay, and then I'm going to change into hungry. And I see that there's init and py. If I change back into the desktop and do Python hungry and hit enter, it's going to say that it can't find the main module in hungry. So it won't actually be able to find that in any of them. So if I did Python and test.txt, it's not letting me do anything, right? So it's trying to determine whether or not it's a Python module, and it's not. So if I go back into hungry and change into old source and do Python like, let's say, custom.py, it actually runs whatever's in custom.py. In this case, it's not running it, right? We got an error there. But it did do something, right? It actually executed something. It's just an error happened with the actual Gmail authentication, which is okay. But that's something that we're going to be doing with this folder now. So let's go ahead and go back into the main folder on the desktop. So I have hungry here. And now let's go ahead and resave this init file. It should, if I resave it, it should recreate it back into that same area. And I'm going to get rid of that init file. And now if I run Python hungry again, it's going to say it still can't find main. So let's go ahead and copy __main. And we're going to make a new file in here and save it. And it's going to be main.py. So these two initialize this hungry folder as a Python module now. So if I do Python hungry, it will do nothing because main says nothing. So let's go ahead and print out hello world, hit save. And we'll print that out, and now it actually does that, right? So this is pretty cool because now what we can actually do is add arguments to this, right? So we can actually have some sort of arguments where we do stuff with those particular arguments. So to do this, we're going to jump back into our main py file, and we're going to go import arg parse. And now what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to write Python hungry something. So I'm just going to say parser equals to arg parse dot argument parser, and the prog or program is going to be just hungry, and then we'll do parser dot add _argument, and we're going to say -- user _id, and we're going to give it a type even, so type of integer. Okay, so that's it. We now have a parser for this stuff. So we have to get what these are. So I'll do args equals to parser dot parse _args. And then we're going to print out the args. or the arguments. Okay, so parser, of course, this right here is related to what we called for this class. We ran this class. Another way to do this, of course, would be from argparse, import argument parser, and just do that. So let's actually keep it like this so it's a little bit easier to read. So this is just a variable, and this is just a variable. They're pretty standard variables, and args is what it is. It's trying to get the argument, so setting it equal to that makes sense. Okay, so now that we've got this, let's now do Python hungry, hit enter, and it's saying namespace user ID equals to none. So if I came in here and said user underscore ID and 10, I hit enter, and now gives me user ID equals to 10. So let's see that a little bit closer, and I'll say print args dot underscore user ID, and try that again, run it, and now it actually prints out that user ID. So hopefully right now you're like, oh great, what that means is I can import a function into this main.py and do something with my data. That's what we want to do. So going back into our Finder window, into old source, we're going to open up the hungry data, and I'm going to actually copy data.csv over to this hungry py. Right? So notice it's in two places now. And hungry data, we are actually going to make a new file, and I'm going to say call this git, or actually data manager.py. So something more explicit as to how it's actually working. So data manager.py should actually be inside of the main item there. So let's try that again. Data manager. Okay, so data manager and data init main, all of that stuff is in hungry. Old source is still there, mainly for our reference. Of course, it's on GitHub too, but I'm using it as a reference because this is actually what I do on my own computer. When I'm working on something and I need that right there next to it, I can just open things really quickly and then eventually just get rid of them. So the function that I want to actually copy into Data Manager is that read data function that we just did. So of course, I want to grab all of the imports as well, just in case. So I'm going to go ahead and copy all that, bring it into the Data Manager, and this is all I'm going to have for now. Notice how the file name is. We are going to have to adjust that because the way it's working right now is not ideal. We don't want to have to write it every single time or in every single function. And I'm going to go ahead and close out that hungry data. So now I just have three files that I'm going to be working with, and those are the main three files inside of the hungry there, and also the data.csv, but we don't need to open that or work with it at this point. So now inside of main.py, we can actually import that function. We can import this read data function by simply doing from data underscore manager import read underscore data. Read data. Okay, so why is it that I can import it here? And that's because of main.py. So if it wasn't in main.py, we would have to use dot for relative importing. But since it's in main, this is on the same level there. But that import itself, that's how we're going to do it. I'll show you another way at another time, but for now, this is how we actually import that read data function into this main file. And now that we've got that, we're going to go ahead and do print read data and user ID equals to args.userid. And this will actually allow us to get the data based off of what we're passing. So if I go back into the terminal and do 10, it's saying no file or in name data.csv. So in read data, we might have to actually update how we are getting that specific file. I did mention it before, but now is going to be the time that we have to do it. And this is likely because of where this function is being called. So let's actually add data.csv to the desktop. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste it into the desktop, and we're going to run this again and see what happens. This time it actually runs it, and it says no item found. Now what exactly happened here? Well, it has everything to do with how we named this file and where we're calling the function, right? So we're calling the function in the desktop. We are not calling it inside of the module itself, right? The file name is going to, or this open function is going to be relative to where we might call it. And actually naming it this way makes it a lot harder on us in general, right? We want it to be a little bit more dynamic than this. And to do that, we use something called OS. This is a built-in Python library. So we're going to import OS. And I'm going to say file item path equals to os.path.join, and we want to get it of the where this file exists and also the file that we're looking for. So where this file exists, you can do os.path.get current working directory, and then you can get data.csv. So that's one way to do it. I can go ahead and copy this and do one more way and say os.path.dirname and then __ file __, and there we go. So these are two different ways on how to actually get the folder that you're in, which is this. These two call the folder that the current file is in, and then it's going to look for that data. So this is a much better way to actually find that file name. So I'm just going to put in here file name is now just the file path, because open itself is actually going to the file path on the system. So let's go ahead and print out what that file item path would be anyway. So now I save it. I save all of the stuff. I don't actually have to do anything other than go back into terminal and press up. And we've got os.get current working directory. Oops, and no underscore there. Slight little error there. Okay, anyway, so let's go back into terminal and try that again. And now it is showing us that user ID 10 is not found, but it's still looking on the desktop for that data. So let's try that again and get rid of the current working directory. And now let's try it based off of the file and run it one more time. And now it's showing us hungry data. So those two are just slightly different. As you see, this is the working data, the current working directory where I'm running this file. And then the other one is the actual path to where that file actually is. So hungry data as versus users CFE desktop, right? So this latter one is definitely what we want to work more on, not the current working directory. Okay, so now that we've got that, let's go ahead and delete the old CSV file that was on the desktop. And that way it's no longer in there, and the data is all inside of that module. Okay, so if this is not making a whole lot of sense, definitely check out the OS documentation on Python. But basically what we did was we were looking for the current, the directory of where this file exists. And what this does is gets the directory of where the Python module might be being called, or so where I'm working. Like in this terminal, I'm working in the desktop. If I was in Hungary, I'd be now working in the Hungary folder. So os.get current working directory would give me that Hungary folder. In fact, let's take a look. Python 3, import os.current working directory. It shows me where I am, right? And that's true when we go into the desktop as well. So again, Python 3, import os, current working directory. It shows me where I am. So that call, when we actually call it, it's getting that directory, whatever it is. And then os.path.join just combines those two things and makes it very user-friendly for Windows, Linux, and Mac. Okay, so now we've done a lot. Let's go ahead and get rid of this right here. And I want to do some more stuff with these particular arguments, right? So we have our user ID, but if I come back in here and run the Python 3 Hungary and press enter, I get none, right? So, but if I do Hungary -- user _ID and hit none, it's saying that I have to actually have this argument. Okay, so that's cool. So that means that if I actually ever add .. or -- user _ID, that it's going to give us an error if I don't actually put it in. I could also use a shortcut function, so I could say -ID and then -- ID. So let's try -ID now, and it gives me the same thing. So if I did -ID 10, it should give me the same thing. So let's actually give it some data back, and I'll say 4, and there it is. It's giving me back some data. So that's pretty cool. It's actually showing us essentially what we want. We now have a shortcut and a long way to do it. And of course, we could do this exact sort of thing with our email. And right now, I'll just say E and then -- email. Type, I'm actually going to leave off for now. Well, let's just call it a string. And let's see if that works. And then I'm going to go ahead and do -E, and I'll say hello@teamcfe.com. Press enter, and it gives me none. So let's get rid of those quotes, actually. We don't want to add those quotes because those aren't necessary. I do it again. Still giving me none. So let's go ahead and try. It's possible that there's something wrong with that function itself, but the idea here is it's running through and it's actually going to get us the stuff that we need. We can just try -- email and see if that makes a difference. It shouldn't, but it might. And no, it doesn't. So let's go ahead and jump back into our data manager and make sure that we actually have an email row and all that. So let's open up our data. And we have our email row. We should actually get something for hello at. And maybe it's because, oh, I know exactly why. Our read data. We're not actually printing it out. We're not trying to. So we come back in here, and then we're going to go ahead and use args.email. Because again, it's going to be what the long form is. That's why it wasn't working. Okay, it had nothing to do with the function itself. And we get literal base hello at email. Oh, there's another problem here. So we try email. And now we get it. There we go. Okay, cool. And of course we could try to use both of them, but they're not necessarily gonna work as expected. So if I use both of them, -ID and 3, it doesn't work exactly like we expect, but it does send us back both things. So it sends us back the user of ID of 3 and also the first person who has that same email. Okay, cool. So there's that, but we might want to just adjust this a little bit, right? So we might want to do some stuff with these arguments, and also these arguments are not required, right? So if I just did Python hungry, I don't actually get any errors. So to make a required one, we could just get rid of the dashes and just do parser add argument, and we'll say type, and we'll give this type equals to str, or excuse me, string, and then we want to add some choices here, which we can just have a list of choices. We'll see what this means in just a second. So view and message. Okay. So now if I type out Python hungry, I get, hey, too few arguments. So that means that I have to add in view. So if I did view and press enter, it gives me nothing, right? So view was a choice. If I typed out ABC, it gives me nothing. It says invalid choice, ABC, choose from view message, right? So that's pretty cool. But I can also add another one. And let's just say did send. Let's just say that. Choices are true and false. It's kind of a weird argument, but let's just go ahead and do it. I'll say ABC, and it'll say choice. You can't do it from those choices. So instead, I'll just say view, press enter. Again, it'll say too few arguments, so then the last one is true, and then it works. So the way you add these for the arguments, for the ones that aren't required and don't have dash dash, then they're just in order, right? So that first one was type, the argument was type, so we have to add that first argument first, right? Otherwise, we'll get that same sort of error, invalid argument type. So that's kind of how that works. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this did send function because we don't need it. Okay, cool. So since we have this view of view and message, we should look back at our data manager and see, okay, I have read data, which is actually giving me back this data. But maybe I want to do some things a little bit differently. So back into my main, I'm going to come in here and just say if args.type equals to view, then I want to view something. So I'm going to go ahead and just print these out now, right? And then we'll say elif args.type equals to message. Then we're going to print out send message. Okay, so now let's go ahead and take a look at this, and I'll say view uid equals to, or excuse me, just ID equals to 3. I press enter, and I see that ID. We can print out, notice that it prints out the none and then also the path, which is coming from here. So let's go ahead and get rid of that path. We don't need that anymore. So I do it again, and I see there's 2 there. That's cool. So it's actually showing me this stuff. And now if I want to send the message, so instead of view, we can say message and hit enter, and then now it's doing send message. And of course, send message would show us the ID and all that stuff. Cool. So now that we have this Python module, our program is starting to shape up a lot nicer. It's actually becoming a program that we can execute on our command line, which is pretty cool. So we still have a few more things before this is actually functional, and that is finishing off setting up this data manager based off of what we've already done. All right, so let me know if you have any questions on this one. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow.